How often are you talking about generative AI these days?
Oh gosh. What day is it?
Yeah.
Second time this week already. So,
okay,
yeah,
okay, got
it's
it.
a popular topic.
Well, it wouldn't be an AI presentation without a note card. So, okay, tell us a little bit about Moveworks.
Sure. So for those that don't know about us, we're a company-level co-pilot that helps employees find information, solve issues, and take action across all of the different systems, from IT systems to HR systems, essentially helping employees stay productive. We use a lot of large language models. We've been doing this for some time. We founded the company 7 years ago, but since they really became on the scene in 2019, and really have been focused on this intersection of employee support and AI. We have companies like Broadcom, Honeywell, Northrop Grumman, and the likes who use our product every day to help employees basically stay productive and use chat as their primary interface to get help. That was a thesis that we had from the very, very early days of Slack's growth, and we felt like that was a direction the world was taking. And we're based in Mountain View, about 500 employees right now.
So you've been thinking about large language models for a while now, prior to November 2022.
Yes, true.
Okay. So just, giving you some context for the expertise here versus there. So how would you set the stage a little bit for us on the market drivers that have made the hype around GenAI so fervent?
Sure.
What would you say there?
Yeah, so I think that ChatGPT is incredible. And for the first time, hundreds of millions of people in the world got a chance to meaningfully interact with AI. And I think that's all true. But there were some secular shifts that I would say really contributed to why this has been so explosive and why this is not just another hype cycle, but a true shift of how the world is going to work. And I go all the way back to 2016. When we started this, we started to see the growth of chat worldwide. You had Slack and Teams in the workplace. You had WeChat, WhatsApp. You had Instagram. You had iMessage. 150 billion messages sent every single day, right? And now it's, I think it's closer to 200 and something, but this was back in 2018. And so you saw that trend, and then you saw the trend of work from home and hybrid work with COVID. But what that did is it put a really fine-grained sort of focus on employee productivity. If you were late for 2 minutes to a Zoom meeting, you would apologize. In the old days, you wouldn't apologize if you showed up to a meeting 2 minutes late. You walked in the room because no one would have even noticed that the meeting time had already started. And then you, of course, saw the advancements in large language models, generative models. People were generating images. You probably saw in early 22 your first images of DALL-E or Stable Diffusion and others. So that really started to play a role. And when you combine all of these factors, along with then the economic circumstances that we found ourselves in 2022, where every business was trying to combat the inflation that we were all seeing with more automation, there was this goal already in place that we had to make our businesses more efficient. We had to make people more productive. We understood what that felt like. And then ChatGPT came out. And then all of a sudden, people saw that as a way to solve multiple problems using a medium that now the world was very, very familiar with and ready for.
Yeah, I mean, in my working with sales teams from many different industries, I think that the pressure to figure out how can I get 10 to 15% more productivity out of the talent that I have, whether that's from talent reductions or whether that was just from some of the holdover issues from the Great Resignation, remember that? And so just finding different ways that was the question, which is what are ideas you have or what have you seen for that particular challenge? And one of those answers might be, have you thought about AI and automation? And now, I've got clients that come in that like half of them say, how can I get some AI, generically speaking, right? And another half that is taking a far more comprehensive approach to asking those questions. But I think something you said that was really important, which was the first shift or driver behind the hype, it's more interpersonal. It's like this, it was the first time that as a person, I actually felt like, as a person who works in knowledge work in general, I wouldn't say threatened, but afraid. And I think that that's a feeling that a lot of people at many levels have felt that has driven the hype in just, I need to learn. I need to develop a point of view. But anyways, I digress. So tell us a little bit about, obviously, this hype has affected Moveworks.
Yeah, sure.
So
sure.
how?
Look, I'll just make a point on what you said before, and hopefully everyone here kind of, maybe this is sort of well understood at this point, but because there's so many new developments happening, the difference between where you are in your understanding and where the experts are is actually not as great as it might be in other tech waves.
Yes.
Where there's a lot of deep understanding and you're sort of late to it because it's kind of matured. In this case, the delta between you and someone who sounds like they know a lot, but perhaps actually doesn't understand all the details, is no more than a few hundred hours of reading. I think it's really a tractable problem that I think everyone can achieve a level of sort of competence and experience that is available. To your question about how it's affected Moveworks, we've seen obviously the market size really explode for us. I don't know if that's 5x or if that's 6x. What we do know from a metric standpoint, organic inbound demo requests has gone up by 3x. We've seen field marketing efforts turn a real nice ROI for us. I think there's a 33x multiple on top of the funnel to field marketing events. People like to get together, and we're seeing that especially with our constituents, with CIOs. I think outbound is relatively the same, though with small improvements in terms of productivity. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. But that's obviously driven by human capacity to have conversations and so on and so forth. My CRO, Marcello, is sitting over there, so anything that I'm not saying correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is there are improvements that we're seeing across the business. There is a mandate that everyone has now to investigate this category. So that leads to a lot of other, I think, beneficial effects that we're seeing in terms of the marketing and sales funnels.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote the hype cycle profile for generative AI for sales, and it was, as soon as I got the assignment, I knew exactly where this thing was going. The very tip of the peak, like a skateboarder stepping into a half pipe. Like, this thing is going straight into the trough. And I think we're about to enter that period really, really quickly. And you're obviously hoping it pushes through that quite quickly as well, I bet. Just a little data for you. Trying to be, as a research firm, staying on top of this, sometimes you have to abandon some of the long tail tactics when something's moving so fast, a la COVID, to take more of a journalist style. And so we have these pulse surveys and webinars that we use to gather data frequently and ask the same questions over and over again to try and understand some of the changes. And what's been interesting is one of the most recent ones, 1,400 business leaders, so more specifically VP and up type of roles, but in a variety of roles. And what we found is that 47% of them that are investing in AI or GenAI are doing it for customer-facing use cases. And what was interesting was actually that the split across those use cases, growth, cost optimization, and retention. What do you think the ratio is?
Growth, cost optimization, and retention?
Yeah, pie chart of 100.
Ooh. I think growth, maybe 20%. What was the next one?
Cost optimization.
Cost optimization, probably 50%. And the rest is
retention, customer experience.
Yeah.
It's actually almost evenly split across those three, which is interesting. And actually, the more you learn about generative AI, the more that just makes sense.
Yeah.
And so let's talk a little bit about that.
Or it says that they actually don't know.
Well.
I mean, right?
So
if you don't know what flavor you want, you just say, I'll take a little bit of everything and see where it goes. But
I mean, and I think that they're, okay. This is not scripted. Right. This is not scripted. Do you think that's a bad thing?
No, I think there's going to be a lot of experimentation. I think that's what we should do. Actually, as leaders, we must experiment. We must try so that a year from now, we're not saying we're still guessing at what's going to be useful for our businesses. We need to try things. We need to experiment. We need to buy new products and tools. And I think what's happening with these 1,400 business leaders is they're going to do the same.
Totally.
I think we'll all be smarter for it.
I'm going to get in. It aligns with the advice that we're giving, but we'll talk about that in a second. what has Moveworks go-to-market done to invest in generative AI?
Yeah. Well, there's there's a variety of things. So first of all, I think if you think about the bigger shifts or the bigger sort of effects on our sales motion, we've seen two, if I were to characterize it that way. The first is the fact that generative AI is now a subject matter of the office of the CEO. And when CEOs get involved with something, you know it's real, and you know there's big money against it, right? And coming off the backdrop of 22, where every CEO promised greater efficiencies, and they were put under extreme duress for it, right? Benioff with these activist investors, if you don't cut costs, we're gonna cut them for you. He had to do that, but now you have to do more with less. And so we're seeing a lot of opportunities where CEOs are asking CROs, CMOs, CTOs, CIOs, COOs, what's our generative AI strategy? And that is trickling down to more opportunities for us to sell. And so we're configuring around that. We're also partnering and talking to some of these big influencers. So if you think about who's in the ear of the CEO, it's folks like Bain. It's folks like McKinsey, BCG. They're charging $1 million a month for my conversations with CEOs for advice on generative AI. Now, I know how hard it is to get a SaaS deal closed, but it seems like these deals are getting done overnight, and it's because they want the right input and the right advice. So understanding what those priorities are of the CEO has been something that our team has spent a lot of time trying to understand, because we would normally sell to the CIO. It would be about the CIO's agenda and what really mattered to them. Now we're seeing an opportunity to really kind of elevate that. And anytime we can align with the CEO's objectives, there's a lot more juice that we get to pull from. Now, the countervailing issue, sort of almost polar opposite that we face, and this has also shifted how we market and sell, are these things called generative AI councils. Have you guys seen those in your deals yet? So they're showing up more and more. We see them in companies with more than 5,000 or so employees. And these are a bunch of randomly selected folks from legal, finance, security, who raised their hand, said they're now experts on AI, and they get to decide what gets purchased. Now, there's a couple of factors there. They are very much dictating what can come in, what can't. They do extra reviews. They also have an eye towards the entire business, because they sort of have this current mindset that you can't have all these point solutions. You need to have these sort of singular monolithic solutions, platforms that sort of do everything. And we'll talk about my thesis on copilots and such later, but I think that that really does lead to the incumbents having the advantage. So you have to fight against that. You have to sell to these AI councils. We have a whole enablement program around this. We have collateral. We have decks. We have white paper speaking just to the AI, generative AI committees. One, to make them look smart, to educate them, but also to help them see the benefits of partnering with an upstart, partnering with a company that perhaps has a lot more depth, skill, and expertise than an existing incumbent that's just adding it on. So those two things are really influencing how we think about our motion, from going much above the CIO now to also thinking about these groups who we never really had to face before.
That 1,000% aligns with the inquiry that I get from clients, right? They have some that have a little more of a decentralized permission to run, and those groups are collaborating on hypotheses for how generative AI, whether it's directly with a vendor or whether it's through some kind of skunkworks project, are thinking about just creatively making an impact in quarter, next quarter, on projects, versus the committee that is really trying to align on point of view that may not benefit your CRO next quarter, but will probably set you up for 2024. You hope, right? So okay. Back to the question.
Yeah.
What's your team doing for go-to-market? Not just how you are interacting with your market.
Yes.
But projects that you've got going on internally?
So we're starting to leverage some of the new generative AI capabilities that our current sales and marketing tools are providing. Call summarization, automatic field filling inside of our CRM based on these calls, based on these conversations. So that's happening. We're using tools for our SDR team to help them scale outbound outreaches based on customized emails and things of that nature. We've also been building our own capabilities. What was interesting is because we're an LLM company from so long ago, we already had the ability to read a Gong call, to read a Zoom recording, and summarize it and transcribe it. And our team used that regularly. But even a company like ours, who ostensibly knows how to do this really well, we can't keep engineers on those initiatives forever. And so we eventually say, hey, look, what can we buy versus build? Because we need to move on to other types of development as a company, and so we can't keep sustaining those initiatives. We're also seeing things with our sales team using our own internal version of our chatbot to take on certain tasks and workflows that we would assign to other groups. For example, security teams, so security questionnaires, would normally get sent to someone at our company called Chorus. And Chorus would fill them out, and it would be about a 3 to 4 day turnaround. And that sort of was the process, and that felt like sufficient for what we needed. Now what's happening is the sales reps can actually go directly to our bot, and it has access to all the same security documents. And it says, here's the questions, 150 words, 300 words, bullet list of this, and the bot just does all of it in a matter of minutes. Then they're filling it out. They're still passing it on to Chorus to say, hey, is everything copacetic? Are you good with this? And now the turnaround time is a few hours or less than a day. So I think that you'll start to see a lot of workflows accelerating. I think what I look at from a lens of sort of the board and kind of our economics is I want to see improved sales efficiency because of these tools. And I know Doug was talking about LLMs and sort of other use cases, and I think there's just going to be an explosion of different ideas. But ultimately, our CAC should be lower, our sales efficiency should be higher, and if it's not, your competitor is going to be. And even if that doesn't affect your business, your more efficient competitor is more attractive to an investor. And where do they put their capital? They put it against winners. And so while it may not always align with what we sell and what we do, if we're not as fit, then we're going to see some of those issues start to slow us down.
I heard a lot of efficiency. Generally speaking, if I overly simplify and stack rank the value propositions of sales tech, there's visibility, there's conversion, and there's efficiency. And right now, the advice that we've been giving and I just heard a lot of efficiency, but I think there's something more strategic going on there, which is you have to simultaneously invest in a couple of things. And this is advice that we've been giving our clients. The first thing is you have to invest in the frontline relationship with generative AI. Because if you don't understand the frontline relationship with generative AI, how are you going to understand how that will actually influence efficiency per rep? You have to understand what the new benchmark is going to look like for your company and your go-to-market instead of waiting for what broader industry benchmarks might look like in the future. And the second is you have to invest in your talent to figure out what this actually means. How does the fundamental deployment of generative AI in my go-to-market really work? How do I take an unstructured data source and turn it into an insight? And how does that insight get fed into a prompt to improve better email prospecting? That takes time for your people to figure out. The growth hacky marketers tend to be ahead of the game because that's a skill set that they already have. But investing simultaneously in talent development right now is key in order to unlock more advanced use cases in 2024 and beyond. So that's just what I heard you basically say, just summarized differently. Okay, super cool. So let's talk a little bit about, you've talked about how companies are buying generative AI, more or less, right? Yeah. In so far as how the buying groups are forming and the buying drivers. But talk to us about product strategy. More specifically, Copilot mania.
Oh yeah, there's copilots everywhere. Every day, every week, there's going to be another Copilot announcement. I think whether it's a Copilot or a GPT or some extension to an existing tool, our point of view is that every product will have some form of a conversational component added to it. And either that lives as a standalone Copilot that you can access from Slack or Teams or some other interface, or it's ingrained or embedded into the product experience. And so I think that ship has sailed. I think everyone's now on this plan of using generative AI to enhance their products. The question is so where does that leave us? I think the best analogy is sort of on your phone. You look at your phone right now, there's probably 400 apps, 300 apps. Some you've downloaded and used once because they're crappy. Some you use every single day. And I think the goal is to make your app, your Copilot, your generative AI capabilities to be on that front page. And there's going to be a fight for that front page. Where can you get people's attention? Where can you find a use case that they want to use every single day? And that will then drive more value for obviously your customers, but also then for your business. And so that's how we see things playing out. Of course, there is a share of wallet problem. Not everyone can afford to buy every Copilot for every employee. The thing starts to get pretty out of hand. So I think you'll also start to see some companies give it for free, some companies include it, where they're just not seeing that much of an advantage, whereas others, like the big platform players, are now sort of, putting out pricing, and they're very confident that their Copilots are going to be used by a larger number of individuals. So I think that's key. I think for us, we've tried to be this independent Copilot that works across all systems. We're not biased. You don't have to put your content in this system for it to work. It can work across anything. And so tying ourselves to Teams on that left nav bar gives us that visibility, which is what we fight to keep every single day. And over time, that gives us the ability to have more use cases across the entire employee base.
As I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, at this conversation, I was kind of tasked with trying to figure out WTF is going on in sales tech. And so I put together a survey, and I sent it out to as many companies as I could, specifically vendors. So one of the benefits of Gartner is you send a vendor survey to companies like Salesforce and Microsoft, they'll fill it out. But I also sent it out to every single player probably in your tech stack. Over 40 companies responded to this survey. And then I called the technical experts and said, what does this mean? What does this mean? And they taught me. And after that summer of just a fire hose of vendor analysis, I kind of came out with there's really three differentiators, if you will. The first one is UX. And I am incredibly excited about what generative AI is going to do for sales reps and sales managers in making their life easier. I'm very bullish on that. If you think about how unstructured the sales workflow is, how often people talk about, oh yeah, then you get an account, and then you do X, and you're like, wait a second, do you know how much work goes into, and then I got an account, and then I did X, in terms of just doing research, understanding what's going on, figuring out the context, putting together a point of view, thinking through an engagement strategy, talking about, many of you may relate to that, but that's such an unstructured workflow that generative AI can actually benefit in so many ways, and you start to see examples of that just as something as simple as call summaries. Calls are such incredibly rich data sources that you can unlock with generative AI. I'm very excited in a nerdy way about what that can do for us. So that's one, user experience. Number two is, and this is kind of a generic comment, but I think it will make sense with an example, vendors that allow you to take a unique data source, either that they provide or that you already have, and activate it in a new, interesting, and useful way faster. And so you talked about emails. I think emails are a really cool, emails are where all the rage is in generative AI right now because it's such a practical use case for it to start with. But it's when you really dig into what's going on in these vendors behind the scenes, it's incredibly complicated, I think to a fault that they've made it overly simplified for everyone. Oh, AI emails, whatever, moving on. But it's actually really incredible what's going on. So one data source that I'm interested in is personality AI. Is anybody here familiar with the DISC assessment? The DISC assessment? Okay, so the DISC assessment is a personality communication methodology, right? There are certain personality types that just do not like me. I've learned the hard way. And so, but there are communication methods that make it easier for me to get my point across. This is the heart of sales. And so some of these AI vendors allow you to take, for example, these personality analyses and say, you're selling to a CTO, this is how they may want to receive the same exact message that you would send to another CTO that fits a different personality profile. It's unrealistic to expect a seller to adapt their messaging at that level of scale and specificity, but it's really a perfect use case for AI in order to adapt a value prop to a different personality. So I think that's a unique data advantage, unlocking it in new and clever ways. Very, very exciting. And then the third one is it's already where you work. And I think that's the most interesting is I have the training to use generative AI for the end user has to be, I look at it and I kind of already know what to do.
Yeah.
And those are breakthroughs in the way you ask sales reps to navigate the stack today. So I'm very bullish and excited about it. But
just to add to your thing, so I mean, we spend a lot of time studying language and what we can extract from it and what we can learn from it. To your point about understanding the customer that you're speaking to, I mean, with just a few chats, these LLMs can now figure out your age, your demographic, and what zip code you live in, because of the style and the techniques and the ways that you communicate. So it's a bit scary for sure in terms of that level, but that's the kinds of insights that our words reveal about us that hopefully doesn't get used in the wrong, but can be leveraged to understand how to better communicate with those that matter. I have a question for you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's funny how that works, right? So,
I'll give you the note card.
So if you talk about Microsoft's Copilot, specifically their GitHub Copilot, they're seeing for those that have deployed it, it's writing 30 to 50% of all new lines of code. Okay, this is insane. For $20 a user per month, that's way underpriced. You could charge $1,000 a user per month. 12 grand is nothing relative to the cost of an engineer. So what do you predict 5 years will be the sales efficiency gains? Will we be seeing a doubling of quota? Will we be seeing increase of 50%? I'm sorry, what?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm asking him. I'm not going to say the answer.
Oh boy. I think we have a lot of learning that is going to be done. I think we're going to see a lot of different playbooks or options for how, with risks involved, in how we'll see go-to-market teams built. I think it's it's a nuanced question because if you ask that in the context of a growing company that is building from scratch, we're already seeing different behavioral dynamics in terms of like one growth marketer sending the same amount of outbound emails that used to be 15 SDRs, right? Yeah. We're already seeing that today in some of these pre-seed startups or early stage, but in larger companies that have existing ways of working, I think it will take more time to see those adjustments. So I'm going with a non-answer for now, but I do think it's realistic to expect one person to do a lot more because we're letting AI eliminate the noise. Yeah. And I do believe that is going to be the standard. But is it double? I'm not ready to answer that question yet.
We'll check back in 5 years.
Check back in. I'll give you an answer in a year and a half. How about that?
Perfect.
Okay. So how are we doing on time? We're doing our Q&A. Okay. So I'm going to ask everybody if they have questions. Yes.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask your thoughts about the vision aspect because I personally have used. I've used GPT-4 Executive, the vision part of it, a tremendous amount of times, and it's like crazy what it can do. Yeah. I kind of want to understand, like, is that on your roadmap? Is that something you're thinking about? Is it something you guys are already doing? I think it's tremendous when you think about the possibilities of put this slide on a deck, get a summary, put a screenshot of this Miro board, get code. Like it's tons of crazy stuff that it's doing. I think it could tremendously impact workflows.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely a multimodal future that's emerging, and I think that's one of the ambitions of OpenAI and many others, Anthropic. Right now, we're mostly focused on kind of the chat, paradigm, but where we see the opportunity is to allow people to upload screenshots. Hey, I'm getting stuck here. This doesn't work. Here's what the computer is saying right now. What do I do next? So it is a very slick, impressive, sort of experience when you can do that. But I think, we're going to see convergence on some of these use cases. When you describe, though, productivity, like PowerPoint and so on and so forth, look, there's a reason why there are 5 different Microsoft Copilots. It's still very hard to get all these things to be as fine-tuned and work as well as they do if they're all under one system. And so the GitHub Copilot is not the same Copilot that's going to generate a new PowerPoint slide for you. It's not the same one that's going to help you with the Microsoft Security Copilot that they have that's going to help you find incidents and so forth. So I think you'll still see some separation between these because to wrangle all of this together is still proving to be quite difficult. You could argue GPT-5, you could argue GPT-6 will just be so powerful that these issues will go away. We don't know. But the problem with these larger and larger models is that they run slow. And so you can't wait forever to get a simple answer. And using a large language model is like, in some cases, it's like taking a rocket ship to go to the grocery store. It just doesn't make any sense. So I think you'll still see separation of these different capabilities, different companies specializing. Even Salesforce has 5 different GPTs now. So they've even taken that approach. So I think, yes, but multimodal, it's very exciting. And it's about what workflows actually does that pertain to. From our perspective, we just see a lot of volume that goes through simple language. And if you can tackle that, there's a tremendous amount of business value that can be unlocked.
Yeah. Question? I'm sorry, I'm biasing people in the front. We'll look in the back next.
Bhavin, you mentioned the buying councils, the GenAI buying councils, and I'm advising a GenAI CEO who is finding not only do they exist, but there's a lot of politics within them about who owns decision-making, and actually on the CIO side, or IT teams wanting to have internal ownership for build versus buy. How are you navigating that?
It's emerging as we go through each quarter. We see chief digital officers or chief data officers fighting for control over making the AI platform decisions, trying to take that away from CIOs. In other cases, we have other constituents come into picture who have an influence on it. What we do see, though, more often than not, is that the CIO does still have a large amount of control. And even when other C-suite folks want things from a generative AI perspective, they still need to get the CIO on board, and that they need to sort of agree with that decision. But I think you're going to see further and further restrictions and sort of narrowing of the passage to get your deals done, because if you have AI in your product, which I think every product will have it soon, these committees are going to be scrutinizing why you should be brought in, whether it's the right decision for the whole company or not. And I think that's just going to take time. We're actually seeing this not just happen in the private sector, but in the public sector. So if you've been following Senator Gary Peters, he's published now sort of a set of laws that they want to pass, which would require the bureaus and the agencies and the departments of the federal government to each have a chief AI officer and to have an AI committee. So if you're selling to the federal government, that's coming soon too, which will add yet more bureaucracy to the overall process. So I think we just have to think about, when latency goes up, right, in networking, you increase your throughput. So you're going to have more folks going after these accounts because you will see some slowdown. Again, I think this is subject to these larger organizations, not so much at the smaller company level or 1,000 employees or 2,000, I think we're seeing quite a bit of speed up in those categories.
Thank you.
Someone in the back?
Hi. Question about, so the fact seems to be that many of the use cases with AI build on augmentation rather than automation. And so I'm curious to see if you have some interesting insights into bringing on some of those AI tools specifically focused on the human counterpart. What training, what coaching needs to be done to make sure that most of the benefits can be reaped from that new tool? And specifically, is there something to say about friction that needs to be introduced either in the tool or in the process to make sure that a human stays in the loop, reviews it, builds a human relationship?
So, I think there's data that Microsoft has published, which is, with GitHub, they're finding that the junior engineers are actually not seeing as much of the productivity gains as the mid and senior engineers, because the junior engineers don't have the same kind of history and knowledge of the code that when the Copilot writes the code, whether it's the right, logic that needs to be in there. Whereas the senior and mid engineers can easily look at it, say, yep, that all works. I'm going to copy and paste that into the file. So you will see a need to actually help educate some of these folks. We are seeing on the IT support side, agents using generative tools and sort of these new AI capabilities are able to onboard in 2 months what would have otherwise taken 6 months. So we're seeing some of those benefits. But I don't know how to think about like where to add the friction, because I think it's on a per sort of use case basis that will determine how you sort of ensure humans stay in the loop. I will say one thing around pricing that we've seen. When you think about these new capabilities and their enhancements, right? They augment someone's work versus replace outright the work that needs to be done. That starts to get really challenging when you try and justify the deal with the CFO. People want to see actual cost takeout or replacement. So we had a customer, our product does many things, right? Search, actions, this and that. But they're like, hey, we use this other search tool. It's pretty good. We like it. But the challenge is, I don't know how to price or to know the value of what better search means for my whole company. Therefore, I don't know if I could pay X dollars per user per month for this. But with your product, it's quite easy because you do the work of 26 full-time employees. And I can quantify that. And so I think where we think about these enhancements, what's going to really start to come into picture is how much of this is just making you a little bit more productive. I've had a CIO, I kid you not, who we were talking about these performance improvements and saving her team time. And she said, oh, so they could go and see their kid play soccer at 4 p.m.? And I was like, whoa. Yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? And she's like, no, that doesn't save me any money. So but the point is there is a ruthlessness around how people are making choices right now because of the fiscal demands on their business, on Wall Street. If another company has got 3 more basis points of margin or whatever coming out, your stock gets hit because of the fact that you're not able to keep up. So I think that as you're looking at these different strategies, productivity gains are still very difficult to measure. And everyone loves ChatGPT, but is it worth $60 for you to pay every single employee to have access to it? I think that's the open question that everyone's trying to answer. But if you can take a task that's being done by someone on your team, like in our case, Chorus, and now have Chorus work on many other things that Damien, our CISO, would love her to do, well, now there's actually a real monetary value that we can ascribe.
And just a short answer to the question from a sales point of view. Three things I've seen. One is this point of view of learn through the work, not next to the work, learn through it. The second is something called, I had a client tell me this is her idea, called generative AI literacy, which was basically taking on I teach search again, more or less. A simple way to parallel think about it. So just teaching basic awareness about how it really works, how it doesn't work, and what your expectations are within the context of a sales job. And then the third one, which is I think the most interesting one, which is just very applied and open practice. Encouraging use, encouraging communities of practice, which is a nerdy sales enablement term, but it's basically like let reps learn from reps, and just focusing on more grassroots use cases. I think those have been 3 interesting talent development approaches that I have seen that are more open and agile, I would say. How many more questions do we get? One more question. Who thinks they have a really good question? So hands went down. Only got one. All right, awesome. That was incredible.
The mic's coming right
The mic is coming. Yes. Suspense is brewing.
Lots of pressure. So you talked about the productivity, the productivity gains. I've heard more than one senior salesperson now say that they're concerned that it's making, because it's so easy, that it's making a noisy environment, and that it may be, they're not saying it is, they're saying it may be harder to close because it's a noisy sales environment. So when you're doing your metrics and you're not only the productivity gains, but are you also seeing that there's a increase in sales associated as well?
I think for us, we see, again, we've seen greater acceleration in the sort of smaller enterprise side. But yes, definitely more time being taken in the larger enterprise side, and that could be a factor of more noise in the system. I think people do feel obligated. We definitely saw this in the early part of the year. Everyone making Copilot announcements, so every business is like, hold on, let's hear all this out. What's been great is now that these Copilots have finally landed, people are like, oh, that's all it is? That's all it really does? Okay. Got it. Now let's have this other conversation on these use cases we were talking about. So I think, as we're all, representing independent, companies, we're going to see some of that hesitation, but I think it's overcomable. I think you're going to see an opportunity to show up, if you can, with code and not a demo, right? There's an oversupply of promises and demo and an undersupply of real strong working product, and if you can do that, I think you can leapfrog some of these delays.
I have a client. I would say, is there evidence that investing in GenAI for sales has direct impact or lift on sales? I would say I've seen yes, but not for some of the reasons you may think. Really more on the pipeline use case is where we've seen the most mature go-to-market use. And for example, I have a CRO who asked their marketing team that owns sales development to see if they can hit a specific target of pipeline sourced through primarily autonomous agents and compare the performance of that to the sales development organization, and that significantly exceeded their opportunities. Now, that wasn't a one-to-one. I bought GenAI and I got more pipeline. Mistake. What it was a gasoline on top of their existing account-based demand generation, sales development motion, and they were able to benefit from all those existing investments that allowed that to be the case. So further down funnel use cases, I'm very excited about what those are going to do for messaging, but we're just not quite there yet. In a year and a half, when I have a better estimate for you, I think we're going to see absolutely yes examples of more deals because of the reps' use of generative AI. Okay, thank you everybody. This was great.
Thank you all.